knocked
Yeah,
out.
their head coach actually had Tony Bennett's hat, UVA's hat, because it reminded him of what happened to UVA in college basketball a couple years ago.
Yep, 116 against UMBC. And lastly, Doc Rivers is out as the Clippers head coach. That's where we're going to go now. SportsCenter brought to you by Goodyear. Whether you're on the field or on the edge of your seat, Goodyear wants you to embrace the unexpected, every upset, touchdown, or fourth quarter comeback, and let it move you. No matter what the season throws your way, Goodyear is here to help to drive you forward. Goodyear, more driven.
Coaching change for the Clippers. Doc Rivers is out following the season.
I struggle to figure out who's going to be a better coach that's out there.
It's always easier to replace the coach outside of trying to replace 15 players.
Rivers is the only coach in NBA history to lose a 3-1 lead in 3 playoff series.
I do think T. Lue should get real consideration. He has all of the winning pedigree that you want.
And for those that may not be familiar, of course, Ty Lue currently is an assistant on the Clippers bench. Of course, was the head coach.
How convenient.
Yes, when LeBron and company won the championship in 2016. It's sort of like a Nick Nurse situation. Maybe the answer is right there on your staff. When Dwayne Casey was fired by the Raptors, they just promoted their top assistant and Nick Nurse. Maybe it happens this way. Though, Jay, I would ask you this question. He is by far the most successful coach in Clippers history, though I'm not sure what that really means, to be honest with you. But in totality, let's be honest, he's been an NBA coach for 21 years. He's made the playoffs 16 times. He's got a championship. His bona fides are there. So the day after Steve Nash was hired as a Brooklyn Nets head coach, you were able to get Sean Marks, the general manager, on the show, and he essentially did say, look, my most important player wanted this guy to be our head coach, so he's our head coach. In this particular case, is it fair to say that maybe the Clippers' most important player had to weigh in on what he thought about the head coaching situation, and Kawhi played a big role?
It just smells weird. Has a weird smell to it. It feels, and this is my opinion, it feels like I watch a coup happen today, a coup. And what I mean by that is, think about 2020. There's been nothing normal about this year, okay, for this team. They play barely 25 games at full strength, healthy, with everybody healthy, okay? Going into this season, Kawhi and PG were coming off injuries where they had surgery. So you're still trying to find team chemistry with two new pieces to your team. The season shuts down for 3.5+ months. These guys come back into a bubble. Patrick Beverley is not there. Lou Will has the lemon pepper chicken wings experience. Montrezl Harrell, extra crispy. Montrezl Harrell comes back into the league after losing his grandmother. Right. Never was the same once he was back into the league. He's a sixth man of the year. Yep. Okay, a lot of moving parts. Now I know they're up 3-1 against the Denver Nuggets, and they lost that series. They should have won. A lot of excuses, but it just feels like that. It was all of a sudden. I never known Steve Ballmer to make a knee-jerk reaction, right? Especially considering all the things that have happened this year with this team. So my thing is, at the end of the day, at the end of the day, that's your line, Key. I should give $1 for your line. At the end of the day, how could Kawhi Leonard not sign off on that? He has to. Like, think about all the best players we have in the NBA. If there's a coaching change in Milwaukee, do you think Giannis is going to have something to do with it? If there is something that happens?
Absolutely.
If there's a coaching change in Cleveland, David Blatt, you don't think LeBron James had something to do with that to a degree?
He did.
Right? So at the end of the day, Steve Ballmer has to have some conversation with Kawhi Leonard about saying, hey, do you want to keep this guy or do you not want to keep this guy? I may want to move in this direction, but I did bring you here to be a staple of our franchise. What do you want to do? Now, regardless of whether if Kawhi's indifferent or not, that answer speaks for itself. And I'm not saying it's wrong, or I don't think they should have made this move. I think you should have made some other personnel moves on the team first before you make a coaching move. But at the end of the day, Kawhi Leonard had to sign off on this, guys. He had to.
It certainly, as you say, smells like a Kawhi Leonard would have to have signed off on it alone, possibly with a PG. I mean, it's one of those situations where sometimes you get a coach that can only take you so far. Did Doc deserve to be let go or part mutually? I mean, it depends on who you're asking, right? They've never gotten out of the second round.
Ever.
With teams that he should have been able to get out of the second round with, whether it was the Lob City guys or whether it was this group. If in fact Kawhi Leonard listened to the powers that be, whether it was Steve Ballmer along with Jerry Weston, the general manager, you got to remember a couple years ago, Doc Rivers wore two hats, the general manager and the head coach. they eventually allowed him to stay on as the head coach. So this is not something that Steve Ballmer and the powers that be came up with overnight. They've already been looking at how to get the Clippers over the hump. This is just probably the end of the line in a situation where they feel like going with a potential different voice is the better way to go for the team's makeup today.
But see, I think here's part of the problem with the Clippers. Doc was the leader of this team, right? Like, it didn't feel like they had a leader on the court saying, follow me. That's not who Kawhi is. Kawhi is one of the best players there is in the league, but Kawhi does not talk. He's not external saying, follow me. He plays by his actions on the court. So when I look at Kawhi and I look at him in San Antonio, he was one of their best players, but that team was led by Tim Duncan, Manu Ginobili, Tony Parker. When he was in Toronto, he was their best player, but that team was led by Kyle Lowry. Look what Toronto has done to get back to where they got to this year. The heart and soul of that team was Kyle Lowry. So now you bring Kawhi to the Clippers, still the best player in the team, but Paul George wasn't a leader, right? Paul George isn't telling people what to do, where to be. Patrick Beverley is a guy that plays defensively, but he's kind of not that guy. You need your best player to be the guy externally too, right? Montrezl Harrell, kind of quiet. I mean, think about all the pieces. They don't have a leader on this team. So my thing is when I think about, hey, we need a different voice, well, I think you actually need a different voice from a player perspective. And I will say this. I know he's probably not going to be in OKC anymore, and he was originally a Clipper when it started. You look at bringing CP3 back to the Clippers.
Whoa.
You look at bringing him back to the Clippers because I'm telling you right now, he will be the missing link from a leadership perspective for this team that they need. He is the pit bull that will tell people where to go, and all of a sudden that allows Kawhi not to have that pressure on him to be that galvanizing force for everybody on that team. And I'm telling you, he will be the missing answer for that squad.
Keep in mind, both Paul George and Kawhi can opt out, become unrestricted free agents at the end of next season. So this is a all or nothing year in some ways. So you really have to think about that when you try to bring in the right coach. The short-term future for the organization essentially rests on what happens the next upcoming season. So what are the other logistical challenges the Clippers are going to face when hiring a new head coach? Woj is going to join us at 7:15, but he weighed in on SportsCenter with the answer to that question.
It's a challenging search. I don't think there's an obvious choice out there for them. And, Ty Lue on their own staff, listen, this is a championship coach in his own right. In Cleveland, came in this year very close to Doc Rivers, and by all estimations, made a great impression there. He is a candidate in some other places, including Philadelphia, New Orleans. Our Jeff Van Gundy at ESPN is considered one of the best minds out there and one of the most accomplished coaches. But, listen, I think they're going to have to take a step back here with the Clippers. I don't think the next coach is clear to them. I think there's a search process that will start here. But this is going to be, for them, a real challenge.
Next head coach will be Ty Lue. It makes all the sense. Who's in your backyard? Key, who's in your backyard? Is LeBron James better than Ty Lue? Nobody.
Makes sense.
Nobody. He helped LeBron James win a championship.
But why would that be the reason you would hire him? Well,
let me ask you a question. Out of all the coaches there are right now in the coaching scheme, who has championship pedigree? Like, who can you go for that has championship pedigree?
But do you need championship pedigree to be the Clippers head coach?
If you have 1 year with Kawhi and PG to get things done, unless you're trying to move PG, yes, you have to. You're trying to win a championship next year. You're trying to win a championship this year. So expectation is if you're changing the coach, you need a different voice. You're going to have some personnel changes. I'm sure they're going to do something.
The reason I asked you that is because there's been coaches. Nick Nurse didn't have championship pedigree. He had Kawhi Leonard in Siakam and
yeah, but there wasn't that kind of pressure on Nick Nurse to win a world championship the way they're having pressure coming in this offseason with the Clippers.
And for more reaction on this news, let's go to Stephen A. Smith. Stephen, what do you make of this news? Doc Rivers out with the...
Well, it's incredibly unfortunate, first of all. You understand to some degree why he's gone, because when you've been coaching a team for 7 years and you haven't been to a conference finals. That's problematic. We understand that. But in this particular instance, when you consider the fact that he's one of the elite coaches in the game, when you consider the fact that they were coaching in a bubble, you had a team, you were coaching a team that basically voted not to be there, which means they didn't want to participate. You had guys like Montrezl Harrell missing about 33 days, Patrick Beverley missing about 18 days, numerous other players missing a slew of days because they were either injured or there were other things that were going on that prevented them from performing. You really didn't have a chance. And then when you consider what transpired in games 6 and 7, when in terms of high percentage shots and things of that nature, they were getting them and guys were just missing. Then you have a leader in Kawhi Leonard, the superstar that you acquired in the offseason, along with Paul George, two individuals that probably would not have come there had it not been for Doc Rivers being the head coach of the franchise, and they don't show up in the game 7. Then it's one of those situations, particularly when you're looking at Kawhi, who is as indifferent as they come in terms of his personality. He's going to work hard. He's going to go on the court. He's going to perform. He's never going to cheat you with effort. But in the end, can you be that leader that galvanizes troops? That was never Kawhi Leonard's MO. So all of those things being stacked against Doc Rivers, what I'm saying is that if he's going to lose his job, you know what, it would have been far more understandable had there never been an interrupted season and he lost under those conditions. But considering the fact that the season was interrupted and then you had guys, the Clippers and the Lakers were the only two teams that voted not to participate,